All right, this time we got some Audio-Technicas here in front of us. I actually managed to snag these off of a Prime Day Amazon sale this July. I managed to snag these up for around $80, which isn't a fantastic sale, but as of recently, I really haven't seen these go on sale quite often, so I figured, if I were to buy these at some point, now is the time. So I went ahead and jumped on it, and they're quite interesting. These are some quite interesting headphones right here. So let's start off with the box. This is the box, ATH-M40X. As you can see, they swivel 90 degrees, but only outward. So if you're wearing them on your neck, the drivers will face the outside, not the inside, which is something at first I find a little unfortunate just because I'd rather have the Audio-Technica logo show off like that. But after a while, I mean, you get used to it and it's no problem. Especially if you're not really going to use them, in public very often. If you're just going to keep them on your desk, then this should be no problem at all. Now, get to the back here. As you can see, it comes with two types of cables there. It comes with a 3-meter straight cable, and it comes with a 1.2-meter studio coiled cable. And out of these two, I strongly prefer the straight cable, even though it's a little long and it, just kind of ends up on the floor the majority of the length. But, well, who cares, I think the coiled cable is, it's a little problematic because you feel it actually stretch out if you use the coiled cable. So I personally do not like the coiled cable, but it's there for you if you want it, and you can take advantage of that. Also comes with the 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch adapter, because as you can see, there's a 3.5 millimeter connector on each of the cables, so you can go ahead and use this on an amp using the adapter if you feel like it. And that's about it. As you can see here, it's got an impedance level of 35 ohms, which means that you can definitely use these off of a smartphone if you want to, and it shouldn't be a problem. But of course, as with every headphone out there, or at least 99% of the headphones out there, if you want to, if you use an amp, it'll be much better for you if you do. So let's open up the box here. And if you look inside, you will see the cable. I'm sorry, not the cable, the headphones themselves, just like this. And I already have the straight cable plugged into the headphones, just because I've been using it with the straight cable. By the way, it screws in, so when you put it in, you have to put it in with this silver thing facing a little to the left, and then you screw it, well, it depends what side you're looking at it, but if you're looking at it from the bottom up, you screw it in clockwise, and that's the way it goes in. These fold in many different ways. You can push them in just like that, and they go in, which is good for storage, and if you want to put them in the bag that it comes with. By the way, let me show you the bag real quick. It's well, it feels like a leather bag to me. It says Audio-Technica. It is very nice quality, and I'm not really sure I recommend it for storing these headphones, just because it's a really tight fit, and well, I mean, it's better than nothing, but I feel like the bag would get really scratched up, and it's a really nice bag, you really don't want to scratch it up like that. So use it at your own discretion, but my advice is either get a case for it or just don't. Just get a case for it. Get a hard shell, flat case that you can just store in a bag, and then use this for storage of something else that you might need, but hey, it looks nice. So they gave you that bag, and here's the coiled cable itself. This coiled cable isn't very long. It's 1.2 meters, but like I said, it just gets really annoying that you have to stretch this out, and you can feel the force wanting to, tug back, like tugging back the headphones, and you have to go back within 1.2 meters of your amp or your source in order to not feel that. So that gets kind of annoying to me. Now, as far as the build goes, it's made out of mostly plastic here. The only metal is right here in the attachments to from the headband to the actual cups themselves. That's the only piece of metal here. And, well, personally, I don't mind it because it keeps these lighter, and the plastic being used here is actually some very good plastic. I really don't feel like this would break on me anytime soon unless you are straight up throwing it across a football field, which, you know, I mean, if that's your thing, then, you know, if you want to do that. But yeah, this is some pretty good plastic right here. It's definitely going to last you quite a while if you take care of them. So good for you, Audio-Technicas. At that price, it's very nice. Now let's start with the comfort here. Comfort, as you might expect from a closed-back headphone, is adequate. It is not the most comfortable headphone I've used, obviously, but it isn't one of the most uncomfortable either. It kind of sits in the middle where, well, as a closed back, there are certain limitations, like your ears get warm because there's no ventilation, unlike with open backs. So you do have to vent them every now and then. These are, I believe, 38 millimeter drivers or 40 millimeters. So they're very small. They are like just clearing on ear. Like they are at the basic entry level of over ear. So they will fit literally around your ear and nothing else. It is just around the ear, or at least that is the way for me. If anything, I do get my earlobe stuck here at the bottom, but not to the point where it feels like it's just tugging and it's pulling on your earlobes. But because I have relatively small ears, I don't really feel the, you know, horrible, well, what do you say? I don't really feel the horrible, I am at a loss for words today, my God. The force on your ears. I do not feel that force on the ears, you know, so that's good. This clamp is stronger than average. Do keep that in mind. They do have a relatively strong clamp, but I consider this to be a good thing because keep in mind that these are monitoring headphones. And the thing with monitoring headphones is that you're going to be looking around, up and down, left and right, and you're going to want to make sure that these headphones don't slide off of your ear or move out of place whenever you basically turn your head or start moving your mouth and stuff like that. So it's very acceptable for what they are. I think they're really great as far as the clamp goes. As far as in public, they don't stick out very much. But they're not exactly the most low-profile headphone either, but they won't stick out like a sore thumb. So if you want to use them, people will obviously see that you're wearing headphones. Like they will stick out in that way, but they won't stick out like I've seen some people wear gaming headsets as regular headphones in public at the university, and it's just really gaudy. You know, you got to wonder, like, really, can you not afford I don't know, $20 earbuds at the very least so that you don't have to be carrying around the headset? So, I mean, it's a strange situation there. But with this, you definitely won't be getting looks like those, although it will be obvious that you're wearing headphones. I do use glasses, and I've tried these with glasses. You can put them on and take them off without having to remove the headphones, and they do not make a difference. They feel exactly the same, and they're equal in comfort for glasses and for no glasses. It's the same thing. So that's a plus side to these headphones. Now let's get to the sound. Like 10 minutes into the video, let's get into the sound, right? Overall, well, they are monitoring headphones, which means they're going to be kind of V-shaped right here. And by kinda, I mean relatively a lot mid-shaped, V-shaped. Especially from someone like me who's coming from, you know, Sennheiser HD600s that could be considered like very, very neutral to quite possibly a little dark in the highs. So These, yeah, definitely feel V-shaped to me, if you ask me. But I don't mean that in a negative way here. In most cases, I don't mean that in a negative manner. So let me explain what I mean. There is definitely a hump between the sub-bass and mid-bass regions, which means that it gives a sub-bass, a good amount of punch and presence that is good for EDM and, generally doesn't bother the rest of the frequency. The problem is in the mid-bass. The mid-bass part of that also receives that hump, that elevation, that makes a few songs sound a little boomy for my taste, just a little too boomy. Sometimes that mid-bass can benefit songs, sometimes it can just be a detriment. For example here, the beginning of The Bleeding by Five Finger Death Punch, where you have the guitar playing and then you have that bass come in. That bass note hit very powerful. It was just very powerful, like almost overpowering, just almost too strong. As if, let me explain it this way. Let's say the bass player in the live performance just kind of cranked up the bass a little too much and he plucked that string a little too hard to the point where, not necessarily like detail-wise, but to the point where you can hear that string rumble and rattle around because the pluck was a little too hard. But Silhouette by Kana Boone, the entire thing just sounds kind of muddy, just kind of boomy and muffled, because a thing that's pretty common in J-rock and J-metal and stuff like that is to turn up the bass, and that's pretty good, especially for neutral headphones, because it's equal representation, a little more equal. The bass guitar gets a little more, more of the front row treatment, which I like because I love the bass guitar. But with these headphones, it brings it too forward to the point where, you kind of want the bass player to just kind of turn it down a bit. So your pros and cons, your different genres, your different headphones, same as with everything. Let's say People of the Sun by Rage Against the Machine. Same effect there, where the bass player turns up the bass. He turns up the bass. And it sounds great on my HD600s and on the Hifiman Sandaras, which, by the way, review coming soon. And in most other headphones that I've listened to that are neutral, that sounds great because, yay, representation of the bass, it's amazing. Then you get to something more V-shaped like this, and the entire song is just overpowered by boom, 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 And you got your drums, and you got the singer just kind of in the background because this bass player was like, yeah, it's my time to shine, So it just kind of ruins the overall song for me, for the most part. But now a positive to that. Let's say Asylum by Disturbed. That song is pure power. That song is pure punch, right? And there, what it does to the bass guitar is it brings it out, but it's not overpowering because the bass player doesn't turn it up as much as other bands. So on, let's say, HD600s or something a little more neutral, it's acceptable, and I like it too. But here, it really brings out that power that the song Asylum needs, It's boom. It is not boomy, but extra punch. It is just very nice on the M40Xs, on the other hand. You know what I'm saying? Now the vocals in the mid region, this is probably one of the worst parts of the headphone, because they don't necessarily sound recessed. They just don't sound special in any way, if that makes any sense. They sound like they're just thrown in. There they are. Nothing special, nothing terrible. It's just the way it is. I'll give you an example. I tested this with Bloody Stream by Coda. And a cool thing to note about that song is that he takes very audible breaths in between his singing because, well, if you happen to follow JoJo's, that's the part. Part 2 is when they're using hamon, and hamon energy requires breathing, and so it's like he's using hamon energy to sing the song and stuff like that. So it's a nice little detail, and it's something I look out for in the vocals whenever I'm listening to headphones. It's a nice detail. I like it. With this, however, yes, you could hear the breathing, but the details weren't really there. It was all pretty much in the background to mid section of the sound. The bass guitar in the song and the the hi-hats and the cymbals from the drums were very much overpowering the Koda's vocals and the breathing when he took a breath. So kind of disappointed with those with the mid section right there. Nothing really special stood out to me in any way, but nothing really recessed either per se. Now the highs, this is probably one of the best / worst things about this headphone. More towards best, but can be a bad thing depending on how you see it. So I consider these to be close to accurate, but far from neutral. What does that mean, right? The HD600s are very, very neutral, but I would not describe them as close to accurate. For example, imagine a live performance where you've got the singer, the keyboard, bass guitar, and the drum set, right? In a small room or a medium-sized room. Something like that, meaning live performance, where they still have mics and they still have, electronics modifying the sound levels and everything of the instruments. It's not just straight up an orchestra where the acoustics of the room and that's it. There's no mics, there's no volume, nothing. It's just the instruments and that's it. Anyway, accuracy for sure. The highs right there. They come across as a little too strident and a little too sibilant sometimes, but in my experience, that is what accurate is. That is what I have heard whenever I go to a live performance of those types of live performances. Those that slight sibilance that's like it's just a little too much, but you can get used to it. That is what accurate sounds like to me. And these do a pretty good job at representing that, where they get airy, but they're very detailed for their price, I think. Sure, they rely on the sibilance and the emphasis on the treble to make that happen. But again, it's not terribly overemphasized where you're just dying and you need something else, right? Or you need to take them off. No, it's not that bad, but it is very accurate in that sense. So you will get close to real life in that sort of manner. Something I really liked is that it brings forward the cymbals and the hi-hats from drum kits and from the highest end, you're talking like 10K above, or let's say above like 4K more or less, right? It really brings that forward, and it makes you focus on that, which is something I really enjoyed. It's something quite different than what I'm used to on like say 600s and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that. Soundstage and imaging. For a closed-back headphone of this size, the soundstage is actually quite impressive, I'm not going to lie. They're not exactly wide. I would say they're like average at best, right? Considering all the kinds of headphones that are out there. There are no HD800s, but they're definitely wider than HD600s. So I'm very impressed. For a closed-back headphone, that's a pretty good that's a pretty good achievement right there. Imaging is actually really great for a closed-back or for headphones in general. I think it's a really great imaging. Keep in mind, my daily driver are the HD600s. So pretty much anything with soundstage will blow me away because the imaging isn't necessarily constrained to a tiny little, section. For example, like the HD600s, they have great imaging, but their soundstage is so narrow that it really hinders the potential for imaging that the headphones have, which is pretty unfortunate considering it's my favorite headphone up to date and will probably continue being for a good long time. Anyway, as far as using these mobile versus an amp, amp definitely makes the difference. It's much better. The only, I guess you could say, benefit that I found from using it mobile is the bass, although it has a little less control, it has less volume. So you do reach that more neutral point in the bass as opposed to the slight emphasis of using it amped. But when you're using it with an amp, the background vocals pop a bit more, which is something I really like. Separation becomes more apparent. I could describe this as kind of like, if you're listening without an amp, they sound just fine. But when you listen to it with an amp, it's kind of like you had a napkin in front of the sound the entire time, which wasn't the worst thing in the world. You could still listen to it perfectly fine. But you remove that slight veil and it gives you like extra detail, extra clarity. And I think that's really great. The sub bass is tighter. The bass guitar sounds a little more laid back and in line, which is, well, definitely beneficial, especially if you don't want it overpowering the rest of the spectrum. Treble is equally as sibilant, but it is definitely smoother, much easier to listen to because it's not so, well, it's much smoother, so it's much easier to listen to it like that. And as far as how high I got with the volume, like the maximum I can listen to this without feeling like, man, I need to turn it down, is 10 out of 15 on my Galaxy S9 Plus or 9:30 a.m. on my Aune X7S with my PC at 100% and the music player at 80%. So they don't require a whole lot of power to make them sing, thankfully. But if you want to make them sing, you just need a little extra power. That's it. Overall, I'm very, very impressed for what these can do, considering they are a budget closed-back headphone. And it's part of the more mainstream too, so it's not necessarily hype that's making these sell. It's actual performance, which is great. Obviously, it's not as good as an open-back headphone, but at this price point, and given that it's closed-back, you really shouldn't expect that. It's perfectly fine to run these from a smartphone. And you know what? I think I'm going to be keeping these as a closed-back alternative for just for listening here at home, or if I want to use these on a trip. I definitely like it. I like them a lot, and I think they are a great alternative for, let's say, I've got my 600s or some other headphone that are more on the neutral side, and then I choose to bring these out every now and then and go a little more V-shaped, just because, every now and then. For 80 bucks or let's say $100, that's not a terrible idea. That's pretty good, especially since you can use these like on a bus, on a train, on a plane in the Ukraine. The build is great for monitoring and voiceovers. I have used them for voiceovers and they're very comfortable. They swivel. I use one of my ears uncovered. I leave one of the ears uncovered, which means I put my right side back. And that definitely benefits me. And no issues with that. They respond to the twist perfectly fine. After a few days of using these as my daily driver, more or less, I got used to like 90% of the sibilants, except for like the worst of the S's and TH's in the vocals. Those were the only things that they still stand out to me, but they're not the end of the world. You can get mostly used to them. And that's about it. So yeah, closed back, budget, gonna keep it pretty decent. Nice alternative.